It was after Operation Stardust, and the Titans had been entrusted with keeping the peace at any cost. The GM Quel comes from a forgotten time in history, and it disappeared as quickly as it appeared in the spotlight. In its short time on the scene, it developed a troubled history because keeping the peace at any cost came with many sins. It was just after I had published my findings on the Heavy Gundam's excavation that I discovered another old and forgotten mobile suit. I tried to celebrate my work being published, but my curiosity wouldn't rest. The locals spoke of another mobile suit that had disappeared from history. Apparently, it had only existed for a short period of time. I quickly suspected that it must have been just after Operation Stardust. Since it's not commonly known, it most likely disappeared right before the Ayuk and the Grips War. That only gave me less than 4 years of history to work with. Unfortunately, if the Titans were ever good at anything, it was erasing history. I searched for many ghost and folklore tales to gain any clues that I can get. Even superstitious beliefs on its existence were scarce. This is one creature that was not taught in mobile suit anthropology college courses. My first major clue was when I discovered that I was being followed. It seems someone didn't want me poking around this part of history. Too bad for them, that it only made me more curious. Eventually, the clues and breadcrumbs led me to a cave. It was hidden in plain sight, which must have explained why it was never discovered before. It was off some small road, next to the middle of nowhere. I must have passed it several dozen times before I was finally able to spot it. It was dark and empty. It seemed like there couldn't possibly be anything inside. As far as I can tell, it just looked like an old abandoned mine. There were some markings on the wall that read, "Might makes right," crossed out. Whatever was inside possibly no longer agreed with the old Titan slogan. My flashlight's battery started to die out, and I didn't know how much further I had left to go. I thought about leaving and coming back another time. The only problem was that I didn't know how long it would be before I could afford another expedition out here. I pressed on. If the batteries died out, I would use the walls to guide me back out. Not long after that, I found it. Despite the long journey it had been so far, it had only just really begun. I had to know how it got there and why it had such a basic arsenal with it. The old documents mentioned it had the bullpup machine gun and hyper bazooka for primary weapons. Some unconfirmed reports also claim it can use a flamethrower and long-range beam rifle. However, when discovered, it only had the GM2 beam rifle and GM rifle. For secondary weapons, it had the standard head Vulcans, along with enhanced hand grenades and one flash grenade. Although it is a raid, this GM Quel has a very stoic personality. It does nothing flashy despite having good mobility and speed. On paper, it doesn't seem that much of a threat, but it is nonetheless the type of opponent you don't ever want to sleep on. It has no stealth, no focus melee, and no overpowered range attack. On an athletic skill level, it might barely make it to a 5 out of 10. But what it gets out of those 5 skill points is around an 8.5 out of 10 in the right hands. My guess is that it didn't want to be upgraded into a standard raid like the Red Riders or Ifrit Nox. After it had witnessed all the crimes committed by the Titans, it decided to go its own way. The Titans, being Titans, did not agree with this, so the GM Quel had to fight its way out. As a result of the battle for its freedom, it fell into the cave where it was discovered decades later. Now, even though it is no GM3 Close Combat, or Striker Custom, or Night Seeker Mark V, the GM Quel is not to be taken lightly in close range. It is fast and can get past an enemy defensive line fairly easily, provided it has some help from its team. Supports at the very least can be content with being able to see it coming. If caught out in the open with enough distance, a support can weaken it enough to give it a chance to escape, or even take it out. On smaller maps is where it excels the most at. It is on larger maps where it struggles. For this reason, it is often overlooked for other raids. This is because it doesn't have any real mid-range capabilities, or some other gimmick to make up for it. The GM2 beam rifle only has a range of 300 meters at level 1. The GM rifle gets 325 meters, which thus lets damage the further away you are from the target. and the grenades alone will only get you so far. In order to make players want to consider using the GM Quel for a buff, all it would need is an additional primary weapon option. The modified Hyper Bazooka should be enough. It is a powerful bazooka, but with a slow cooldown rate of 7.5 seconds in between shots. Combined with the rest of the Quel's arsenal, it should make for a well-balanced raid that still wouldn't make a turn to the dark side like the Pixie. Since it is supposed to be an improved version of the GM Custom, it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask for a level 2 emergency evasion system for a skill. And since it is a post-0083 mobile suit, perhaps also give it a flight control program skill as well. Now, I figure that since it's a raid, mid or long range shouldn't really be a consideration. My argument as to why the GM Quel needs something like the modified Hyper Bazooka, which has a range of 375 meters, is because it doesn't have any special armaments. It doesn't have multiple melee weapons or a smoke grenade for stealth. Therefore, I don't think that giving it the bazooka as a primary weapon option is asking for too much. This old relic should be similar to the Blue Destiny when using the ground-type beam rifle, minus the exam system, of course. The GM Quel can be a solid and respectable raid with the mere improvement. It may not be on the level of the G3, but it can still be fun to use. It can even be fun to fight against. According to the lore, it is supposed to be one of the all-time great GMs, so why not show it? As a historical mech anthropologist, I sometimes wonder how simpler times must have been back then. If something like the GM Quel was able to perform well, it must have been a well-balanced ecosystem across all the 3 classes. There are rumors that a few still exist out in the wild. It is a very rare sighting. I imagine that its food source must have been mobile suits like the Heavy Gundam. But of course, we all know that the invasive new species of raids had a tendency to overhunt their food source, and they didn't respect the balance of life like the GM Quel eventually learned to do after it quit the Titans and their evil ways. Perhaps this is one mobile suit that scientists can save from extinction. As always, this has been Mobile Suit K9, signing off now.